Hey, thanks, Anu. Really appreciate that. And super excited to be with everybody here at Vue.js Forge. So, what I wanted to kind of start you off with here was to kind of show you around the boilerplate code that already exists and kind of show you what our goal is with what we're going to build. So, on the screen here in front of you, you can see our awesome sauce website. And so we've got an e-commerce store here ready to sell some pretty sweet and spicy hot sauce. Um, so if you have not already set up the boilerplate code for this project, you should go to the Vue.js Forge exercise document. This is linked inside of Discord, and click on this preparation guide here. And the very first step here is to grab this boilerplate code. Okay. So if you have not done these steps yet, go ahead and definitely do that. You'll have about 20 minutes after this session of free time to code, to explore the boilerplate. And if you haven't gone through the preparation guide, definitely go ahead and do that. Okay. All right. So back to our site. You'll notice that the boilerplate code actually already has a decent amount going on. So on the home page, we have a hero section. Under that, you have a listing of all your different hot sauces. As you might expect, you can click on an individual hot sauce and you can see, more details about it. Then you can add that hot sauce to your cart. And we get a nice little notification down here, but you notice that the cart count does not actually update. So while the boilerplate code does kind of focus on kind of pre-populating some pages for you, pre-populating some styles for you, I've left a lot of the really spicy features, and I'm going to use that word spicy a lot just because it seems really appropriate for what we're building. I've left some of those really spicy features up for you guys to code yourself, right? So one of those things is going to be making your cart actually function properly. Right? You'll be able to list out all the items here in your cart. Right now, this is just hard-coded HTML, but later on, we're going to be populating this ourselves. We'll also be making this checkout button here work to where you can actually check out with the payment provider Stripe. Okay. Also here on the home page, you'll see that we have some search capabilities, some filtering, some order by, sorting here. And once again, you'll notice when I click on these things, nothing happens, right? Once again, this is one of those areas where you're going to get to spice things up and write the code for yourself. Super exciting. We've also got a login and register page already available in the boilerplate code for you. Now, these are a little bit more fully featured already just because I didn't want to spend too much time implementing auth, but our auth provider, which is Descry, because they're also our data provider, made this work quite smoothly. Okay, so if you're interested in learning more about how this authentication works, over in the boilerplate code, you can look under composables and use Descry.js. And there is an object here called auth, and in it there is a function called signup, another function called login. Okay, and essentially these make API requests to Descry, and it's pretty straightforward. But you don't have to understand that to be able to use it. What you do have to understand about these register and login forms is that in order for those to work for you inside of your, let me not open .env, let me open the example. Inside of your env file, you do need to make sure you already have your Descry base URL set up, okay? Because this is authentication that's set up to work with your Descry project, okay? All right, so we have got the cart, we've got the login, the register page, and that's pretty much the gist of the boilerplate code in terms of what we got in the browser. So now let's start taking a look at the code itself. One of the very first things that I like to do when getting onboarded to a new project is I like to go to the package.json file, because this is really going to be kind of my point of common ground, right? With a new project. Any new project you come to is going to be written by people that, maybe you've worked before, maybe you haven't, but if you're brand new to the team, um, some of the details of that project are going to be a little unknown. But package.json is a place where you can find common ground. These are the third-party dependencies that people all over the world use. So I can really get a good introduction to a project by taking a look at the package.json file. All right. So what do we have in package.json here? Well, you can see that we are in fact using Nuxt. Okay, we're using Nuxt for this project, and that's super exciting because we're not just using Nuxt, we're using Nuxt 3, which is the latest and greatest and like cutting bleeding edge stuff. And I've learned a lot just building this boilerplate and working out the code base for this event about Nuxt 3. It's super cool, has some amazing features that you will get to see throughout the event. Now, it's actually so bleeding edge that it's not at stable release right now. So just be aware of that. Nuxt 3 is still currently in the release candidate phase. And so if you come across any issues or things that you think might be framework related, it's definitely not out of the question. I've seen I haven't had any issues with the framework with my development, but just to let you know, it is still technically in beta. Okay. All right. So we're using Nuxt. We're also going to be using Tailwind CSS. All right. What is Tailwind CSS? Well, if you have not heard, maybe you need to get on Twitter a little bit more. I don't know. But Tailwind CSS is super popular in the front end world these days. Okay. It's a way to style your projects with these utility-based classes. So classes like Flex, so that would correspond to like a display flex CSS rule. You have rules like PT-4, which is going to correspond to a padding top. You have classes like text center, which is obvious there. And so it's what's known as a utility class framework. And it really allows you to iterate very quickly. And I think it works really great with the component type of design that you get with Vue.js, because you can create a component that kind of encapsulates a thing on the page, right? A component on the page. And then you can style it with all these utility classes and then reuse the component over and over again. All right. So if you haven't tried out Tailwind CSS yet, you're going to get a great chance to do that during this event. All right. So as kind of a way to complement Tailwind CSS, we're also using Daisy UI. And it's a little bit more like the kind of component-driven CSS libraries that you might be used to using, things like Bootstrap and Semantic UI and so on. Okay, they have classes such as .btn and .btn primary. Okay, if you take a look at the menu over here, you can see all the different kind of component classes that they have. There's things like alert, avatar, badge, card. Okay, all these different classes to get you up and running with some styles for these common components very quickly. So, and it's actually built with Tailwind CSS under the hood. It is a Tailwind CSS plugin. And therefore, it works great with Tailwind CSS. It's not going to conflict or fight with Tailwind CSS. It's going to give us these extra classes for free. Okay. All right. So let's get back to our package.json file. The next thing that you'll notice is that we have a few different dependencies on a tool called FormKit. Okay. What FormKit is it's a Vue 3 library for handling forms, for displaying your form inputs, for handling validation for your inputs, even generating forms, entire forms based on a JavaScript object. Okay, it's actually a really super cool library that I've really enjoyed using. Its predecessor was called Vue Formulate. Okay, but FormKit is the new Vue 3 version of Vue Formulate, and it is an excellent, excellent library. So the way you'll see this in use inside of the boilerplate code is this is what powers that login and registration form. Okay, so if I were to hit register down here with nothing inside of my registration form, Yeah, you'll see these great validation messages. And all that was necessary to make that work, if I open up my register.vue page, you'll see here that I just had to add some validation to that password confirm field. Say it's required, and say that this is confirming the password field. But we will actually have an entire session on that later on in the second day on how to use FormKit, how to use its validation, and how to use it to its most potential. So definitely stick around for that during day 2. All right. Also, inside of package.json, we are going to be using Pinia. All right. So Pinia is a global state management library for Vue.js. If you are familiar with Vuex, it serves the same purpose. Okay. Um, but in my opinion, and opinion of a lot of people I've seen online, its interface is a lot nicer, a lot simpler to work with. It smooths out some of the complexities that were in Vuex and just makes them a non-issue. So Eduardo is actually going to be showing us how to use Pinia to keep up with the state for our cart in later on today. So definitely stick around for that if you have never heard of Pinia or never used Pinia, and he'll kind of walk you through the steps of what it takes to work with your data inside this tool. All right. The next thing here within inside of our dependencies is Vue use. So Vue use won't play a particularly prevalent part in a lot of the things that you're going to develop, but in a few of the bonus exercises, you can definitely make use of some of the composition utilities given by Vue use. So what do I mean by composition utilities? Okay, so here under functions, and let's go with state. Okay, and I'm gonna zoom in just a little bit here. You can see all of these different utility functions from Vue use. There's use draggable, which helps you work with draggable elements on the page. There's use drop zone, which you could drop something over this and be able to tell is the thing over the drop zone or not, and also be able to call callback functions whenever something is dropped. And there's just a ton of these super useful utility functions that kind of wrap basic browser capabilities and make them reactive for Vue.js. This is a super popular library. We have a course on it over at Vue School, and I highly recommend checking that out. This is an amazing library to use. All right. So also here, you'll notice we're using Contentful, which you guys have probably all seen already, and that is what is going to power our product listings. So somebody will be able to go into Contentful, and you'll see that in the session just after this, and manage all of these different products. Okay. All right. So we talked about Daisy UI. Marked, you really don't have to worry about that too much. That's just something inside of the boilerplate code that I'm using to read some Markdown to transfer some what's the word I'm looking for? Transform some Markdown into some HTML. So like this list here for the descriptions of the products is coming in Markdown form from Contentful, and so I needed a way to show that in HTML. All right, so we talked about Pinia, and then lastly here really is Stripe. Okay, we will be using Stripe at the end of this build in order to process the payments for our e-commerce store, and you'll see more about that on the second day. All right, so that about does it for package.json. Let's take a look now at some of the data structure for the project. Okay. So we are using Nuxt. Remember, we're using Nuxt 3. And so several of these directories will have very special meanings. Okay. All right. So let's take a look here. .nuxt is just an auto-generated directory. Don't have to worry about that too much. Okay. Assets is where we can store things like CSS or images that need to be processed during our build. And inside of main.css, all I'm doing is importing the Tailwind utility classes. Okay. So basically all of this project is powered, the styles for this project are powered by Tailwind CSS and Daisy UI, and there's really not a whole lot of custom CSS I had to write. And that's the power of those two CSS frameworks. All right, inside of the components directory, you'll see several different components that already exist for the build. And one really cool thing about Nuxt 3 is that this components directory, all these components inside of this directory are automatically imported whenever you use them. Okay, so you don't have to manually import, you don't ever have to manually import any of these components in your Nuxt project as if you were using just a regular Vue.js 3 project. These will automatically be imported for you. Also notice though that I'm using some conventions from the Vue.js style guide. Okay, these reusable components that are meant to be reused throughout the entire code base are all prefixed with the term app. Okay, and the components that are meant to only exist on the page one at a time all are prefixed with the word the. And just a note here, the header here, I left in here accidentally. This is not used in the project at all. It's only the alerts and the nav bar. So don't let the header confuse you. You can go ahead and delete that if you want. All right. So that is the components directory. We also have a composables directory. And all the composables inside of this directory are also auto-loaded by Nuxt, just like the components are. Okay, so in use Descry here, this is the main composable you're going to be working with, and its purpose is to really consolidate all your interactions that you have with Descry. This is where that auth object I mentioned a few moments ago lives, but this is also where a user object lives, and it has methods on it like login, logout, get the current user, and inside of this update cart function, so you'll be able to call user.updateCart, this is where eventually you're going to persist that user's cart data to Descry. Okay, so that's something you'll do in a project later on. And they also have a get cart method, and this is where you're going to end up fetching that data from Descry. All right. All right, so that is our composables. Also, we have a data directory here, and inside of data is products.json. Okay, so this is our hard-coded projects that we're populating the listing here with. Okay, when you first download the project boilerplate code. But obviously, this isn't really a manageable way to keep up with our products. So we're going to switch from this to Contentful in the next session. All right. Inside of the layouts directory, this is another special directory with Nuxt.js. It's really pretty cool thing. So this allows you to support multiple different page layouts very easily. Okay, so I have a default layout which powers pretty much all of the pages except for the login and the register page. Okay, on the login and the register page, we are instead using this form focus layout. And essentially what that means is over in, let's open up like register.vue. Okay, so the same thing would be in login.vue. Okay, we just define page meta, layout, and then we tell it which layout we want to use. That is the form focus layout. Okay, so the whole idea here is that I am able to consolidate kind of some styles and some classes for this particular form focused only form on the page layout view inside of this layout. And then on my register and my login pages inside of the, whoops, what am I looking for here? Inside of the template, I can just start with the header and actually get to creating my form. All right, so that's really one cool handy feature of Nuxt.js. All right, moving along here, let's see. Sorry, just checking my time. Cool. Okay, so a little longer. Let me move a little quickly. So inside of our pages directory here, what we have is all the different views for our app. This is another really great feature of Nuxt. It uses what's known as file-based routing. Okay, so in other words, all of these files are automatically registered as routes. we don't have to do any manual work whatsoever with Vue Router. Instead, we name a page login, okay, and it gets mapped to /login, right? So when I visit /login in the browser, I see the contents of this login.vue file, okay? And you can nest things this way too. So let's say I went to products. So this would be in the browser, this would be localhost 3000/products, okay? And then when you have the square brackets like this, so we have square bracket, ID, square bracket, okay? This is a way to indicate a dynamic parameter in this file-based routing system of Nuxt. Okay, so that means in the browser I could go to /products/ and then whatever ID of the hot sauce I want to visit, right? So I don't have to put ID here, like literally the string ID or square brackets ID. This value is dynamic. Okay, this is able to accept anything. So when I visit /products/ the ID of that hot sauce, I see the contents of this square bracket ID square bracket .vue file. And inside of that file, I'm able to access that ID via route.params.id and then fetch the proper hot sauce accordingly. Okay, so that's how file-based routing works in Nuxt and how you can use dynamic parameters in Nuxt. All right, so that is the pages directory. We also have a plugins directory here. And once again, Nuxt auto-loads all these plugins for you, so you don't have to do a thing with that. Inside of plugins is a contentful plugin that just allowed me to provide contentful to my Nuxt app. And you'll see a little bit more how that works in the next session. All right, here we have a public directory, another special directory in Nuxt. These are resources that should just be available at the root of your project. What do I mean by that? Well, so I have public and then favicon.ico here. That means in my browser, if I visit just localhost 3000/favicon.ico, I am able to access that resource. So that's what the public directory is for. Anything that doesn't need any processing can just go here and can be linked to directly from the root of the website. All right, also have a request directory here, which isn't specific to Nuxt at all, but I do have a I do have a really cool extension in VS Code called, let's see, let me open my extensions panel here, called REST Client. And if you use VS Code, I definitely suggest you download this extension as well. What this REST client allows me to do is basically make like kind of Postman-like HTTP requests directly inside of my IDE. And I can even save the contents of these requests to my repository, which makes it super great for me to share across my teammates. Okay, so back in my file explorer here, you can see if I were to open up these this one request file that I have in here, I have a option to send this request, and I have the ability to define where I want this request to be sent to, what method I want to send it with. I can define some headers here and even use variables from a .env file, which it's actually a little weird. I can't use the .env inside of my root project. I would have to copy this .env into my request directory because of the way the extension works. It's looking for a .env in the same directory as this as the actual request is. But yeah, it's a pretty cool little extension that you can do a lot with. And of course, down here I am providing the body of the request. Okay, so if you're familiar with Postman, you'll really like this extension. We also have a server route or a server directory inside of the project, and this is what's going to power our server-side API routes for Nuxt, and we'll talk about that more later on. Lastly, we have a stores directory, and this is where we're going to store all of our Pinia stores. So there already exists an alert store, which is it's a pretty cool little store that Eduardo actually built a lot of this out during our first during our first Vue.js Forge event, and it's what's powering the alerts inside of the boilerplate code. And this is where you'll build your cart store a little later on to manage the items within your cart with Pinia. All right, guys. So that is about all for the introduction here to the boilerplate code. Once again, if you have not completed the preparation guide, definitely get that done during these next 20 minutes of time. This is the exercise technically for what I just went through, but the goal of this was really just to get you spending time in the code, familiarize yourself with this code, and if you've already done all the boilerplate steps, or excuse me, all the preparation steps for the next 20 minutes, I definitely encourage you, walk through the code, throw some console logs in there. Do you know what? One really cool thing to do is something that I do on a lot of new Vue.js projects is I like to open up the Vue DevTools down here, and then I can choose on the page. I can choose one of my components. Is it going to work right now? Yeah, there it goes. Okay, so with this little target icon right here, it's just like selecting elements in your elements panel. Okay, I can use this little target icon, click on a component on the page, and it brings it up here. Okay, so we're bringing it up right here, and then I can actually click on this little arrow icon here. And what this arrow icon is going to do is it's going to take me directly to the file inside of my IDE. Super, super cool. So this means I can kind of interactively explore the code base through the actual site itself. So if I want to know, how does this work? How does this piece work? You can get to the code from the browser. All right. So like I said, in the next few minutes, definitely take the time to finish the prep guide if you have not. And if you already have, check out the code base, look around, check out the dependencies we're using, learn a little bit more about FormKit, Tailwind, whatever interests you. And at this time, if you guys have any questions or anything like that, I would love to take those questions. And of course, I will be in Discord, and there are lots of mentors in Discord to help you out as well. But for this, just a couple minutes, I'll take just a couple questions if anybody has anything about the boilerplate code that they want to ask.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. That was a very nice explanation of the border code, like super explained and detailed way. I'm sure people really got a lot out of it. So we do have some questions, but first of all, a very burning question for you, like the question of the hour, and which is, what is the theme you are using for VS Code? People want to know.
Oh, okay. What is the theme I'm using? So I am using, let's see if I can bring it up here. Material theme is what I'm using. And it is, let's see, material. Yeah, I think there's several of them out there, but it's community material. And I will paste a link to that in the chat a little later.
Awesome. So yeah, so people got the answer for this. Also, there was another question for which you already gave the answer to Daniel, and the question was, can I start with the next exercise if I'm done with the boilerplate setup?
Yes, you can go ahead and start working on exercise number, let's see, we numbered this one number 1. Of course, you can go ahead and start working on exercise number 2 if you feel like you are already comfortable enough with the boilerplate code. Then yes, definitely dive into it.
Awesome. Also, so we have a question like some people would have, like, we were going to be building the entire app from scratch. So they want to know, why are we starting with a boilerplate?
Sure. So this was kind of a struggle I had a little bit while developing some of the content for this event. It's just that it's really a kind of complex project in some ways, and if we were to start completely from scratch, you'd have to do some of the more boring things and the more repetitive things. So I tried to take care of some of that for you guys and help you focus on the more exciting and educational aspects of it.
Yeah, actually, I agree with that too. To remove the extra overhead, definitely.
Yeah.
Also, I think you showed we are going to use Daisy UI, right, for the style library. So people are
Yes.
like, we could have also have some different UI library which are more functional, like Beautify or Caser. So yeah,
Yep. So why go with Daisy instead of like
yeah,
Vuetify or yeah. Well, to me, a lot of times, well, for one, Vuetify is awesome, but it's just not quite to Vue 3 yet. So I would have loved to use Vuetify, to be honest. But sometimes when you're working with just a CSS library that's purely stylistic and it doesn't have the Vue components in it, it really kind of gives you the flexibility, especially in an educational environment, to do some of the more Vue things yourself, right? And learn a little bit more about Vue in the process. Would I necessarily use a straight CSS library in a production app? Um, Maybe it depends on the app. If it's just an admin panel, no, I'm just gonna use Vuetify or something like that, right? But there's a lot to be said, a lot to be said for um, doing a lot of the Vue functionality yourself, and then just having a framework to take care of your styling.
awesome. Yeah, makes sense because we are also focusing on learning Vue.js and yep.
Yes.
Also, because you showed some of the features about Nuxt 3, right, when you were showing the boilerplate. So, what are some of your favorite features of Nuxt 3, and what were the particular, reasons to choose it for the build?
Sure. I sent out a tweet like 3 or 4 days ago, maybe talking about some of the things that I really enjoyed about Nuxt, and I'll say the same thing here. I really enjoyed I really enjoy the auto imports. Like it saves so much room in my file because with Vue.js 3, you're using composables a lot, and so without Nuxt, you're importing a lot of things, and so those auto imports with Nuxt are just a huge time saver. There's also some generators that come with Nuxt 3. So you could do like Nuxy add and then the type of file you want to create. So like a plugin or an API route or a page, and it will generate automatically some scaffolding for you. So that's really just a really nice time saver. Um, and also just the fact that Tailwind plays, or excuse me, Nuxt plays so well with TypeScript and all the different auto completions and things you have inside of your IDE because of that is really super awesome.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Uh, thank you so much for sharing all these with us. And I mean, we are going to invite you a lot more on this stage. So yeah, but it was really nice. And actually, I also like the cool extension which you shared about the REST client because I heard about that but never used. So I'm gonna use it for my next project.
Definitely give
And
it a
yeah,
try.
yeah, I'm sure the audience will also use it if they haven't used it already. And yeah, I hope that today we are all going to make some hot sauce like hot our Vue.js Forge conference is like. Let's make it as hot.
Absolutely. Let's make it hot and spicy. I love
Yes.
it.
Cool. So I think with that, we will leave of and give the audience 20 minutes for to work with the boilerplate, and then we will be back with the next sessions and exercises.
All right.
Thank you
Thanks.
again, Daniel. Yeah.